And I realized that an author takes a blank piece of paper and puts words on it. A perfecter or an editor is also a wordsmith, but he takes that piece of paper that's already got the words on it and they cut it all apart, cross everything out, make notes in the margin, and they make it better. And so there's two different mindsets there. Some people can look at a blank piece of paper and they're like, I don't know where to start. But other people are like, well, I've got all these ideas, I can't wait to put them down. And so there's starters and there's finishers. You only have to have one starter, but you have to have a whole pile of finishers.
Welcome to the Unbound podcast. And to change it up, David Rethemeyer is going to introduce us today.
Well, I am your co-host, David Rethemeyer. I am the marketing coordinator and IT director for Unbound, and I am joined by my co-host, the president and CEO of Unbound, Jonathan Brush.
Thank you, David. It's fun to be here with you all again, and we have a high energy, high content presentation for you today. And that is more presentation than conversation. We get a chance to introduce you to Rhea Perry. Rhea Perry is the definition of energy in a human body. And Rhea is intense. She is fast moving. She is creative. She is full of new ideas that just kind of fly off of her like sparks. And you cannot help but be enthused about whatever Rhea is talking about when she's talking. And today, honestly, David and I get a chance to kick this thing off and then get out of the way as Rhea has a whole bunch of things to share with the audience. And if you're interested in business, if you're interested in kind of alternative education, if you're interested in the idea of making money, or maybe you're concerned about the idea of making money, Rhea's going to talk about things that touch on all of those. And so, David, any other thoughts before we go into this presentation?
I will just go ahead and provide just a helpful hint for our listeners, because I know that there's a lot of people I know who listen to podcasts and just automatically switch their podcast playback speed to 1.25 or 1.5. I'm going to encourage you, as soon as Rhea starts talking, you're going to realize that that is not going to be what you're going to want to do, because she delivers her content already pretty much at 1.5 times speed that most people do. So just encourage you to, you're not going to be short of having content delivered to you at a pace that you're able to listen to podcasts away.
Yeah, one final note, Rhea does have a slide presentation that she brought for the podcast. And so if you're watching the video, this will automatically show up. If you're not, don't worry. The slides certainly enhance what Rhea is saying, but there's nothing that Rhea talks about that you have to have the visual to understand. So if you hear her talk about starting slides or things and you're listening to this as you're driving or working out or something, hang in there. They'll all make sense and it'll hang together the whole way through. So with that, Rhea Perry. Well, Rhea, welcome to the Unbound podcast. We're delighted that you're here, and I'm delighted that I get a chance to introduce you. For those who don't know Rhea Perry, I believe I'm correct in stating that she is one of the founders and pioneers of the homeschool movement in a lot of very important ways. She also worked with some of the folks who were instrumental in the early days of the homeschool movement. Probably more than I know of. I know of at least a Bob Farewell, who's a friend as well, and was instrumental in making it possible for people like me and people like David to be homeschooled and for me to homeschool my own children. And so for that reason alone, it's fun to have Rhea here and to acknowledge that, and a tip of the hat there for all the things that she's made possible that we have benefited from as a family. But I know Rhea more as somebody who is absolutely passionate about being an entrepreneur. She's been an internet entrepreneur since 1999, which if you're keeping score is a fairly early start. She has a real focus on home business and helping others. But I know her most as a really passionate coach and cheerleader for anybody who's trying to be successful. And that included me. We had a very pivotal conversation at a homeschool convention years ago. I don't even remember what year it was, and I don't even remember what convention, but I do remember the conversation with Rhea. And then quite a few years went by when we didn't have any contact with each other. And then recently, I called her up out of the blue because a mutual friend recommended it. I was like, oh, I remember Rhea. And I spent probably an hour and a half of what was supposed to be a 20-minute meeting getting advice and perspective from Rhea, which was just really essential. Ended up with her saying, hey, you should come and do a webinar for our Ascend students, which was really well received by our Ascend students and still has conversations buzzing, including in my own home. And after that, we said, now that we've hooked you in this far, we should get you on the podcast too. So it's my honor and privilege to have you here. And so, Rhea, thanks for taking time to help us again and to be on the Unbound podcast.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for having me. It is always so fun to talk to you and your young people about the things that I have just discovered in life that we don't talk about enough. And that is real life things like real education, real projects, real business, real books. And as you mentioned, Bob Farewell, people who are real mentors who are instrumental in changing people's lives in many, many different ways and for the glory of God, because we're not in this thing alone. And the thing is we don't know what we don't know. And so when you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you are in different ways, it's only going to be beneficial to everybody. And so thank you so much for all that you do at Unbound, serving your audience. And it's a pleasure to be here and an honor to speak to your audience.
Well, we're delighted to have you here and delighted to listen to what you have to say. But before I've got some questions. I know you've got some content that you're looking forward to sharing, which is fantastic. But give our audience some background. Tell us a little bit about your story, Ray.
Well, long story short, we started homeschooling in 1987. My husband was a public school teacher and did not want our two children at the time to go to school. We had continual arguments about that for 10 years before I finally gave up and said, okay, by that time we had three children. And even though I have a degree in education from a major university, I just didn't feel like I could do it. And so we stepped into it. We learned a lot along the way. But the one thing that we didn't really know how to do was to steer our children into their career paths, because all that we knew of education was all pretty much just generic. And if you went to college, you could take a specific path and get out and go get a job. But what if you didn't want to have a job? What if you wanted to be an entrepreneur? And what if you wanted to work from home and things that we were thinking about back then that people have been stepping into here lately? So we were continually challenged with the concept of training our children to think differently and to be entrepreneurial so that they would have whatever they did with their lives would be purposeful. And along the way, I just started studying the Bible for what God said about business and making money and serving other people and how were you supposed to do that. And, I had a connotation on my mind that business was evil and I had to get over that. Money was evil. It was okay to be poor, but not rich. So there were a lot of different mindset changes that had to happen before I could give myself permission to even step into that. But as I studied the Bible year after year after year for the same topics, looking for the same information, the Lord kept bringing to me people and books and just literally outright speaking to me in my heart through the scriptures about what our purpose on life on this earth is, purpose in life. And so I stepped into an entrepreneurial realm, and then the Lord put me in the middle of the internet millionaires in 2003, who changed my thinking again. And so I've just been bringing people who know how to make money in a bunch of different ways to the homeschool audience since 2000, and in lots of different ways in small groups and live events. I've been speaking at homeschool conventions, just sharing what I know. And now I'm working on a book. So I'm trying to put it all together so that it's just all in one place and easier to share with others. So we've seen a lot of success. We've seen some moms and dads bring each other home from corporate America. We've seen some kids do that, bring their parents home from corporate America. We've seen families create home businesses together. We've seen amazing things that people have done just because they had a glimmer of hope that the Lord gave us through study and entrepreneurial education.
And a note about that book. Ray has told me that she's been working on that book. And so we're encouraging her in that, looking forward to it. And when it happens, she'll be back. So we've already flagged that and said, hey, when the book comes out, we'll have you back and we'll talk about that. But Ray, you said a bunch of things there, but there was one that I know caught my ear because I've struggled with this myself. And I frequently run into this with students. And that is, there is an underlying and sometimes a flat explicit idea in Christian circles that too much money is bad for your faith. And I will tell you that my own sort of journey with that is that my parents, who I owe everything to and have a phenomenal relationship with and cannot say enough wonderful things about. But I will also tell you that we grew up with a lot of scarcity. And my parents never said it this way. So I always want to be careful how I protect my parents, but they never said anything outright. But there was this implicit understanding, and I think it was a little bit of a self defense thing, that we may not be rich, but we have each other, right? That was kind of the statement. And what that wasn't meant to be was a jag at somebody else. But what I kind of internalized was you either got one or the other. It was never presented as a dichotomy, but somehow as I grew up, I kind of had internalized this idea that you either were rich or you had a family. You either had a lot of money or you had, good relationship with your parents, with your spouse and your kids and all that. And so at one point in my life, Ray, I actually was struggling, and I had a coach and mentor say, "You'll do fine as soon as you get over being afraid of being successful." And I said, "I'm not being afraid of being successful." And he said, "Yes, you are. You're lying to yourself." And I was really upset with him. And then I faced it, and it turned out I was. And there was an interesting sort of convolution that I went through and almost a revolution. And so I think that's something that catches my attention. I've heard you talk about this in pieces before, but maybe if you could just say, is too much money bad for your faith? How do you attack that, or how do you look at that?
That is a huge conversation, and there are many aspects and many scripture verses to discuss about that one topic. That was one that I grappled with a lot because my husband was raised in a very conservative Christian background. I was not. My father was an architect. My mom worked. She was a school teacher. We were middle class. We had enough money. We were never poor, but we were never rich. But my husband was not from the same situation that I was from. And so, of course, he was the leader of the family. So he steered our direction in our conversations and tended to just say, well, hey, if we don't have the money, let's just do without. And when you have 7 children, that answer doesn't work for very long because
Right.
there are needs. And so that was what kind of forced us into this direction. But when I came to the conclusion that the Bible gives us after studying the whole thing is most of the guys that were in the Old Testament were the man of the land. They were the man. They made a ton of money. They had lots of flock and servants and land. They were the man. If you study the Jewish people, they have always, through history, always been the most successful entrepreneurial philanthropic people group that there is on the planet. And nobody else touches them. God has blessed his people. He wants us to prosper. He wants us to have money. He wants us to have power with our wealth so that we can go out and do good. The problem is that we are in a selfish society that says, oh, hey, I want to have the expensive tennis shoes and the big vacation and the second home and the third home and the fourth home. And we start hoarding it for ourselves. It's not that we have money for ourselves. It's so that we can do work in the power in the kingdom of God. Look at the last election where we had billionaires contributing to campaigns. They could swing a campaign because of their contributions, whichever way they wanted it to go. So having money can be a tool that you can use that God can use for the glory of God. It can also be used for evil, which of course we've seen. The thing is that I think the admonition in the New Testament was to those guys who were not using their money correctly in the Old Testament. He wasn't saying don't make money. He was saying be wise with your money and use it for the glory of God. And we're supposed to be listening to God. The biggest sin that we can commit is not listening to the voice of God. He's still speaking to us every day these days. And when he says, I'm giving you this money, go do this thing. And we say, oh, no, we're going to go buy a boat or we're going to go buy a doodad, as Robert Kiyosaki calls things that you don't necessarily need to have. You're using that money for yourself. And you're not supposed to muzzle the ox while he's plowing. But it's not about us accumulating toys and things and status and power and vacations and all that kind of stuff. It's about using that money for the kingdom of God. So I don't totally believe that once we get over that fear of success, like you're saying, that poverty, scarcity mindset, that yes, then we can step out and go do some amazing, awesome, wonderful things for the kingdom of God.
I find that sort of paralleling that, there is a sort of a mystical understanding of money and success when it comes to business. And so lots of people, and I've actually heard this said, it's like people have a Midas touch or they don't, right? Like, oh, that person, they just know how to make money. Well, that person, well, they just, and people, and I think at some point it's a bit of a defensive mechanism. It's a bit of excuse making. But I do think for certain people who have not grown up in an entrepreneurial environment, there is a mysticism to making money. There's this kind of this thing that some people have and other people don't. And so I was wondering, often in Unbound, I'm trying to look for core principles, the things that are true no matter what. So Ray, you've helped quite a lot of people be successful and find that entrepreneurial drive and ability. You've proven it yourself. If you were to boil that down, what are some of the fundamental mindset things that you look for or even teach for people that say, I have no idea, like I'm not an entrepreneur. I wasn't, nobody in my family is an entrepreneur. This idea that I can make money on my own is kind of foreign to me. What are some of the first things you start with and helping them sort of look at things differently?
That's a great question. So it all comes down to education. Education is a foundational part of life. And unfortunately, what we have stepped into in the last 100 years in America is not true education, it's indoctrination. So when you have a 3-year-old that comes to you and starts trying to sell rocks to the neighbors, that's an entrepreneurial spirit. And so we moms say, oh, well, that's not okay. That's not fair. That's not right. So it's wicked. You're being greedy. Stop doing that. And so we kind of kill that spirit that's in those children and don't give them permission to be who they are. And they feel that guilt in their hearts because it's a natural thing to them. I mean, there are some children who can naturally sell anything. They just have a natural propensity to do that. And that's a certain skill set that needs to happen in business. So it's easier to develop it when it's young and to give the child permission to be who they are than it is to try to train an adult in that type of a thing. There's all kind of training programs out there for sales, and they try to take people who don't have the right mindset through those programs, and sometimes they're not that successful because it's not the skills that they don't have, it's the mindset. They aren't giving themselves permission to do that thing because they don't feel like it's okay. And so that's one of the things that I really want to encourage homeschool moms in, because we have the freedom to do that, is to go with your children. When they start taking off in a different direction that goes different from what the book that you're studying today say, follow that. Delight directed education is the best thing. Don't wait till later. Don't wait till they're a certain age or a certain grade level or they've completed this or completed that. I talk to people all the time and say, start with your children when they're young. And they're like, well, this kid's got to finish high school first. This kid's got to finish college first. Nope, that's too late. You need to start when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, young, so that they can get the right idea and that mom is on their side and helping them. And even though I've got a lot of moms who have not even graduated from high school, who have educated some amazing young people who've gone on to do great things. Moms who are not entrepreneurial, if they'll just step back and get out of the way and, kind of steer the kids to do the right thing and to be moral in their decisions and in their behavior, they can learn from their children, because some children are naturally entrepreneurial. But I think that we've educated that basic concept, that basic desire out of our people in general.
So let's say that, you've got two opportunities here. One is if you're a young parent listening to this and you've got younger children, encourage them to sell some rocks to the neighbors, but encourage those gifts that you see and as they grow up. But often I think you and I both work with folks at the other end who maybe had some of that entrepreneurial spirit stamped out. And there's maybe two things here. It could be an 18-year-old who's like, I'm not really sure I want to do what everybody else is doing. Or sometimes it's a 24-year-old that says, I did what everybody else is doing. I found that to be not so very satisfying. What are some of the first things that you do with those folks to kind of open up their mind to some different possibilities? What are some of the first things you say to them?
Well, I actually have a little presentation put together
Yeah.
right here. If you want me to step into this, that kind of answers those questions, would that be okay if I step
Yeah,
into this?
that'd be great.
Okay. So what I wanted to talk about was to basically is be who you were created to be, because we all know Henry David Thoreau, who wrote Civil Disobedience and other essays. He said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And as I go to homeschool conventions and I talk to families, I talk to a lot of dads, because I have a session called How We Brought Our Dad Home from Corporate America. It's full of men. They want to come home. They don't like where they are. They're good men, so they're stuck in a job they don't like, but they have bills to pay, and so that's where they settled and ended up. And they have to, keep everything paid for, so they stay where they don't want to be. But it's unfortunately very true that so many people have found themselves in a place in the workplace where they don't like being there. They don't want to do what they're doing. I had a friend one time who was an engineer, and they put him in the accounting department because they had to have somebody that understood the engineering aspect of what they were doing. He was not an accountant. He was out of his league. He did the work because they told him to, but he wanted to be an engineer and do the things that engineers do, not an accountant. So that's 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 what our educational system these days has basically developed, is putting us into places that we don't really even want to be there. So I ask young people all the time, and adults, who are you? Because nobody ever stops and asks you who you are and how to go in the direction that you want to go in for your career. So in Psalm 139:14, it says, I will give thanks to you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. So we were made in the image of God, but but that's not a cookie cutter. There is not everybody is the same. And God, if you look at the flowers, the lilies of the field that it talks about in Matthew, they're all different. We used to have a 6-acre front field on our farm, and in the spring and summer it would bloom. And there were so many different types of flowers out there. And I looked out there at that field and I thought, that's what people are like. They are all so different. And yet our government education system has tried to cram them into a mold, making them feel like they are all supposed to step into this thing because it's one size fits all. But yet you have kids that are operating at different speed. They have different intellectual abilities. They have different desires. A lot of the visionaries sit out in the hall. It's really sad what we do to our young people. And so if we just stop and realize God made me, I am unique. I have different things about me that are a combination of skill sets. There is a purpose that I serve. A salt shaker has a purpose. A blender has a purpose. A lamp has a purpose, and they're different. They're not all the same. So in Ecclesiastes 9:10, it also says, whatever your hands find to do it with all your might. So it's not like a caste system where God says, okay, here's who I've made you to be. Here's the only thing you can go do. You can only be a civil engineer. That's all you can do. That's not what God does. He gives us free will in so many ways. And he's like, hey, go out and see what you can do. And I think sometimes he works with us and he just sits back and says, wow, let's see what we can create together. I love walking down the beach because on the right side, you have the ocean, which God created, and it's so awesome and wonderful and majestic and amazing. But on the other side, you have these gigantic architectural structures. You have beach houses and you have condominiums and you have all kind of different things that man-made, but God inspired and worked with men to learn how to do those types of things. And it's just a combination of two different worlds to me. I love that. So there's two different types of thinkers. And the first thing that people need to understand is, who are you? Which one are you? Because you can be both in a way, but you're primarily going to be one or the other. And that is, divergent thinkers are super creative, but they're visionaries. And what they do is they stand on the ground, say you're standing on the beach, and you look up and you see opportunity everywhere. Like you look to the left and you say, oh, we can do that. You look straight ahead, oh, we can do that. You look to the right, oh, we can do that. You walk into Walmart, oh, you can see 100 things that they could be doing differently. You just see opportunity everywhere. They need freedom so that they can lead others and plan, but they also have to give themselves permission to step into those things and build a team to do it. But the other thing is they also get distracted. So they can start a project, and then before they've even gotten it off the ground, they see something else and they see something else. That whole shiny object syndrome, that's the divergent thinker's problem, because they see stuff everywhere and they don't have enough years in their life to do all the things that they would really like to do. So that's a small percentage of people. But most people tend to be more like convergent thinkers, and they are the organizers. So what they like to do is listen to the vision that the divergent thinker gave them, and then say, okay, now here's how we're going to make that happen. And they focus on details. You give them a list. They start at the top of the list. They work their way straight down to the bottom. They get to the bottom. They check it off, and they're like, yay, let's celebrate. Now give me another list. If you step into their space and say, oh, let's do another one. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. And you give them too many different projects, they shut down because it's not the way they operate. And they can't handle all of that at one time. So the thing to do is for a divergent creator to have a multitude of convergent people on their team so that they can, if they've got 5 projects going on, they have 5 different people that they're handing stuff off to. And so when you understand that, I mean, you see people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and these guys, they have multiple projects going on at one time. How do they do all that? They've got different teams that step into all of those different projects, and they just keep everything going. So there's 4 basic types of workers. Once you understand who you are, give yourself permission to be who you are and don't try to be who you're not. That's the key. Because in school, we were taught you can make yourself do anything. And if you're smart, you're going to be smart in every single subject. Well, you can play that school game, but in real life, you should really just do what you excel at and really love. So in the types of workers, like say in a corporation, you have the visionary who's like, say he's like the CEO, the president. He's an entrepreneur who solves problems. He looks out there and he says, okay, there's a problem out there. Let's figure out how to solve that by creating business and then jobs. So he's actually doing a good thing because he's coordinating everybody together in order to solve a problem. Business is usually started to solve a problem. That's who's supposed to create jobs, not government, but entrepreneurs. So they create the business, they create the jobs, and they are the visionary. And that's all they should be doing, is continually seeking the Lord, basically, because that's where that vision comes from. And then they communicate with their number 2 person, who is the implementers. So this would be like a vice presidential person. So those are the people that put the plans together. So they communicate back and forth so that they can understand each other. And then they say, okay, well, we got to create the systems. We've got to hire the people. We've got to, create all the structure that's going to happen in order for this goal to be met. And so the implementer is that he's got a sense of vision and he's got a sense of organization, and he steps in and works with the visionary to create the project. Then he hands that off to the managers. So you have a manager in all these different departments: accounting, HR, marketing, product creation, shipping, all these different things. They have to have somebody that's in charge of all that. So you have a manager who has to have good people skills. And a lot of times they don't because they haven't been trained in all that. They've been trained to use manipulation instead of being a servant. And so you have the managers who manage the projects. And then you have the technicians. So that's the webmasters, that's the copywriters. Let's see who else. Virtual assistants, tech people, plumbers, electrician, people that are actually hands-on in doing the work. And so they usually are part of a team. And so they have a manager that kind of guides the team, but they are the ones that are actually doing the work. So when you ask yourself, which one of those things am I? Then you give yourself permission to step into the next place of life. And that is to figure out where you want to go, who you want to go do it with, and what kind of an impact you're going to make on the world. School doesn't tend to educate visionaries. There's really not a place in there where they have any freedom to say, hey, let's create some stuff. I mean, they have art class, which is creative, and they used to. They don't even have it anymore at all schools. They have band, which is creative, but they don't have like business creativity where we're going to figure out how to create a project and make it come to fruition. And also that a lot of times in school, they don't really encourage teamwork. They want you to do everything yourself. Whereas in business, you have to have a team. You can't do it. Steve Jobs was an amazing person, but he could not do every single thing that happened at Apple by himself. He had to have a team. So we need to encourage our children to step into that visionary world and really hear from God. So one last concept is, are you a starter or are you a finisher? So in Hebrews 12:2, it says, fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith. Well, I used to work as a society editor at a newspaper years ago, and I had to write a lot of columns and feature stories and things like that. And I realized that an author takes a blank piece of paper and puts words on it. A perfecter or an editor is also a wordsmith, but he takes that piece of paper that's already got the words on it, like your ninth grade composition teacher did, and they cut it all apart, cross everything out, make notes in the margin, and they make it better. And so there's two different mindsets there. Some people can look at a blank piece of paper and not do anything. They're like, I don't know where to start. But the other people are like, well, I've got all these ideas. I can't wait to put them down on a piece of paper. And so there's starters and there's finishers. So you only have to have one starter, but you have to have a whole pile of finishers. In fact, if you have more than one starter, now you have like two chefs in the kitchen. You know, you don't need to have that. And so I tell the kids at the homeschool meetings, conventions, you've got two kids that have lived in your house forever. Mom goes and says, go clean your bedroom. So kid number one, he's 12 years old. He goes into his bedroom and he pulls everything out and he doesn't know what else to do. I mean, he just gets started and he goes to the other boy and he says, hey, I'll pay you $1 if you'll come in here and clean my room for me. And so he's like, oh yeah, okay, sure. So he goes in there and cleans the room and then he gets in trouble because he didn't clean his room. And so mom says, that's not okay. I told you to clean your room. I told you to clean your room. And that's not what y'all did. But what they did was they solved the problem. They created the business project, which is that's what we do in life. And so mom has to realize that starter son is probably never going to finish anything. He gets overwhelmed with details. But if he's smart enough to go hire somebody else to clean his room, that's not a bad thing. That's how you get things done in business. So the second son is the finisher son. He sits in his room and he doesn't know where to start. He just sits on the floor and he's just like, I don't know where to start. Mom comes in and she says, why are you not cleaning your room? And he says, I don't know where to start. So she says, all right, we'll start at the door and do this wall, this wall, this wall, this wall. Make your bed, put all your stuff on the floor away, stick it in the closet, clean off your desk, and vacuum the floor when you're done. So he's like, oh, okay, because she's now given him a system. She gave him a list. She gave him a place to start. And so now he'll step in there and he'll do the whole thing if he's been trained to be disciplined, because he has the system in place. And so we judge our kids and we mistreat them basically when we give them an assignment like that, because we don't understand the differences in how they think. So you put those two boys together and they're going to make it happen, but it's not going to be done mom's way. So an example of something was where we created something that operates by itself is I have a company called the Internet Transcribers. We turn audio like this into print. So we have a manager in Orlando, I think, or somewhere, I'm not sure where she lives. And then we have transcriber girls all across America. And so if somebody uploads their audio into our website or emails it to our manager, then she sends it off to our girls. One of the girls that's available right now will transcribe it and then send the Word document back to the manager, and then she sends it back to the client. And we used to have 24-hour turnaround, and I'm not sure we're able to do that right now. And that model is kind of going away now because of AI. So we're figuring out how to adapt to the times, the changing times. But that business makes money for me every year, but I spend 0 seconds on it, 0 seconds, because when it's time to send all the information in at the end of the year, the manager sends it to the accountant and everything is all taken care of. So that's the way to create a business. And so that you are not in the middle of doing everything yourself. You're in it as for the part that you need to be doing and contributing your part, but you're working with other people. So one concept that I learned early on was about virtual assistant. I was in a mastermind meeting years ago with a bunch of internet millionaires who were just doing all kind of things, just amazing things. But I found that they were doing little tasks themselves, like when it was time to schedule an appointment or upload a blog post or, set up a Zoom meeting or whatever, things like that. They were doing it all themselves. And I asked, why are you doing that? Why don't you get a girl that can do that for you, that you can pay, $15, $20 an hour? Back then it was $10 an hour to do that for you. And they'll work part-time. They can work from home and you just give them access to what they need. And so they didn't understand it. So I just went out and got some of my homeschool moms who I knew were trustworthy, salt of the earth people that you can completely trust. And I created a list of all the things that I needed to have done in my virtual business. And I did a training. It was like a 6 or 8 week training of all the different things that I wanted somebody to do for me. And so, long story short, we still offer that training off and on, but we also have it with an apprenticeship, because the problem that you have in life is you go get your education at your school, but then you go to apply for a job and they say, what experience do you have? And that's the killer right there, because you have been in school and you don't have any experience. So if you can offer an apprenticeship along with a training program, they're getting the training and the experience because they've actually worked with somebody. So what we do with our virtual assistant training is it's virtual, and we update it now a lot because things change on the internet all the time. And then after they take the training, we have a 1-month apprenticeship with us so that they're working on projects that we're working on with my VA, who's in Texas. I live in Alabama, now about to move to Tennessee. And then after that, we give them another client for the second month for free. That client knows that they're going to be able to use them. And at the end of the month, they can say, yes, we want to keep on going with each other or not. They have the opportunity to do whatever they want to. So, and that's worked out really well. We have some girls that have been working for the people we put them with like 10 or 15 years ago. They're still with those guys. And we train the virtual assistants in how to have multiple clients, because if you're working part-time, you can manage a bunch of different people using software, and that's one of the things we teach them how to do. So here's just a couple of things that an assistant can do that a business person should not be doing for themselves. And this is not expensive to hire somebody, and you can just hire somebody out part-time. They set up conference calls and webinars like this event that we're on right now. Somebody set this up. You have a young man, David, who is your technician, who's recording all this stuff. That's the right model to have, where somebody else is managing the project. Schedule appointments. I use a Gmail calendar. And so my assistant schedules appointments for me. She can even book things for me. One time I was driving with some friends somewhere, and we decided to spend the night. And so I called her real quick and I just said, hey, get us a room on the beach and where we were going. And I hung up. And the girl that was with me said, what? Wait. We've got to tell her all the details, and we've got to tell her where we want to go and what we want. I said, no. And so she booked a place on using my credit card because she had access to it, and then she put the address and the confirmation code in the calendar. And then she texted back and said, done. And so we readjusted the GPS to go to that address. And so we walked in the front door. We were there. I handed my phone to the girl at the desk. We got our room. Everything was straight. And the person that was with me was like, how did you do that? And I said, it's a system. When you use a system, it's just streamlined. And this was not the first time we'd done that. And then managing clients' emails, basically mass emails, because, when you send mass emails out, there's a process that you have to go through. And so I write my emails on an email, and then I just send it to my assistant. She uploads it. She puts pictures, she puts links, she double checks it to make sure I got all the details right, that kind of stuff, because that's not the best use of my time. She just oversees client project. Whatever the project is we've got going on, like I've been hosting live events for 20, 30 years. She would manage those from Texas. And then sometimes when we would have a live event, she would actually come and then be on site to manage the process, provide basic customer support, or you can have separate people for that. They manage client blogs, social media, whatever they're trying to do. Some of them even do more than that. They make sure that the calendar tasks are completed. Like when I get ready to go on a flight, you have to check in at Southwest 24 hours ahead. Whenever I book a flight for myself, because I like to do that part myself, because I live 2 hours from the airport. So I've got certain parameters I've got to make sure happen. Where it says, tell other people you're coming, I put my VA's address in there. So when she gets an email from Southwest, she puts that on her calendar. So the 24-hour period before my flight goes out, she's going to log in to Southwest and check me in. Now, she's on a cruise right now. And so I was not able to have her do that for me when I flew the other day. So she put that on my calendar. And then she texted me and she said, I can't do this for you on the day it needs to be done. I put it on your calendar. Don't forget to check yourself in. So you have to communicate with each other. And then, of course, we have a multitude of websites and all kind of different things on social media and our social presence. So she helped manage that too. So that's just one of the things. So that's just a few of the things that they do. And we train them in all kind of gadgets and tools and things to use. So we actually have a program that we offer. And we had a Black Friday special a while back. It's at educatingforsuccess.net/VA, which stands for virtual assistant. But that's just one thing that I love helping people step into is either be one or have one. And then also reading, that people have got to learn to read and get off of video games and Facebook and things like that, because reading challenges your brain and your mind and the way that you think. There's a book by a friend of mine, Josh Tolley, that's called Evangelpreneur: How Biblical Free Enterprise Can Empower Your Faith, Family, and Freedom. He's an interesting guy, and this book says a lot of very, very profound things that people in the Christian world need to hear. I have another man who I've heard before. He's not a personal friend, but I have heard him. He spoke at a conference that I've helped host. Rabbi Daniel Lapin, he also has a podcast that's wonderful. He is a Jewish man, Jewish rabbi, and his book is called Thou Shalt Prosper, 10 Commandments for Making Money. He basically says Jewish people give their children permission to make money because in the Old Testament, that's what Moses spoke to the people this is beside the 4 rivers, there is gold, and gold is good. And it never goes back and says it's not. And so that's why they go into jewelry and gold and business and making money, because they believe that they're honoring God by increasing. Because the number one word that we should live by in the Christian world is increase. We have a tendency to just, no, let's see, what would be the right word? Vegetate. We just kind of sit. We kind of just, get into our little rut and we just kind of be there. But we're supposed to be increasing in everything, increasing our faith, increasing our reach, increasing our numbers, increasing our families, our children, everything. And we don't have that increased mindset. And then the J. Lee Grady wrote a book called 10 Lies the Church Tells Women. He's a pastor in Orlando, Florida. And he said, I want to raise godly young men to go out and conquer the world. And he had 4 daughters. And he said, okay, God, what's up? And God said, hey, train your daughters to be warriors and go out and win souls and do right thing. And so he's put this book together that just gives women permission to step in and do things that they feel in their heart that they're supposed to be doing as well. So those are just 3 books that I would recommend that your audience read. But basically, your talent is a gift from God. It is for you to serve God with by serving mankind. So if you just sit around and don't do anything, I mean, yes, you can praise God, you can glorify God, and, you'll get a reward when you get to heaven. But if you actually use your gifts and your talent to do something crazy, amazing, then just think of how you're going to impact the entire world. You're serving God by serving mankind. And so that's the thing that I have tried to instill in the people that I've talked with in the past years is don't settle for mundane. Don't settle for what we've been sold. Step out and use your gifts and your talents to glorify God by doing something new and different and crazy. I mean, because God is super creative. I mean, he created watermelon and popcorn and the ocean and, stuff that we just can't even imagine. And how he did, we don't know how he did anything, but he wants us to step into that creativity because we're created in his image. So my conclusion is don't follow the crowd, follow the Lord. If he speaks to your heart and says, let's go do something crazy, don't say, no, we can't do that, because that's basically grieving the Holy Spirit. When we tell the Holy Spirit no, and that's one of the big no-nos in the Christian world, but yet we do it all the time. And we justify it by saying, oh, we don't do that here. We have to follow what somebody else is saying. So let's step aside from following the status quo and follow the Lord.
Well, thank you, Ray. We started this conversation by said, Ray, somebody as I know who is passionate and excited about teaching other people. And if you didn't believe me, I believe you believe me now after hearing some of that passion and expertise come through in what we just learned here. So there's a lot of content here and there's a lot of guidance that I would just say, even something as fundamental as the divergent thinker or the I'm sorry, what was the other side of it, Ray? It's
Convergent thinking.
convergent thinker.
Yeah.
We have a story that's actually an essential part of who we are at Unbound, where at one point I was like, I would rather gouge my eyes out with a stick than have to sort this email. And Megan Hyatt, who many of you know if you're familiar with Unbound, said, I think that'd be the most fun thing ever. And there was a pause and I was like, wait a second, what did you just say? And really there was that realization that one of us was thinking in one way and one of us was thinking in the other way. And both were essential. And even as recently as this morning, that came up where we've been working on something and I'm saying, hey, we could do this. And Megan's saying, we could, and this would be the way we could do it. But don't forget, if we did it, we'd have this cost. And I was like, both of those things are really obvious and both those things didn't occur to me. And that's why you need both sides work. So, well, Ray, we'll be eagerly awaiting your book. But until then, I believe we can find most things at rayperry.com. Is that correct? Is that the best place to find
Sure,
out
you
all
can start
things
there.
good? So, and of course, there's the website for the presentation here in terms of learning about the VA stuff. And definitely take the time to see the content there. And Ray, thank you so much for taking your time to be here, for the ways you've invested in Unbound students a couple times here recently and me over a longer period of time. And so we really, really appreciate your time and your expertise. And we will look forward to having you back soon with a book in hand.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. It's my privilege to be here, and you're doing a great job. So keep going. You're doing awesome.
Thank you. So, David, you think we can take what she said and go out and make some money?
I don't know. I think there's some pretty good tips in there for just being able to kind of optimize whatever you're doing, and I think it's interesting how she brought out some of the differences in how people operate and the ways that they can use some of their unique strengths and abilities in wherever they are, and how God has wired them. And actually, Jonathan, I think that you have a book about that.
Yeah, I was smiling as she was doing the presentation thinking, "Hey, we've got a bit of a take on this." And so we have a
Mhm.
book published called The Personal Triangle. I think by the time you listen to this, we'll have a second book out called The Team Triangle: How to Find Work That You Love, which is a sequel, a standalone sequel, so it builds on the Personal Triangle, but you don't need to read the Personal Triangle, read the second one. That actually takes some of the ideas that Ray talks about, fleshes those out. One thing that Ray talked about that she kind of took a different turn before she continued on this path, and I wanted to kind of go back and visit this again, is that she outlined the different kinds of thinkers and the way they approach things. And so she talked about, if you're an innovator and you're working with ideas, that you need to surround yourself by people who can get those ideas done. I would just add that sometimes there's a lack of understanding of that all business is entrepreneurial business. And that's not true. And my experience, actually only a small amount of business is entrepreneurial business. A lot of business is intrapreneurial, which is innovation inside of a system. Moreover, there are kind of two kinds of businesses. There are businesses that are something new, which is a new approach, a new perspective, a new way to bring something forward. And that's very entrepreneurial. But there are also businesses that are built on proven things that continue to run. And so, as an example of this, an entrepreneurial business will be building cars that run on some sort of new technology, electric technology or hydrogen or something that completely different. That's an entrepreneurial venture. However, a car repair shop is not particularly entrepreneurial. It is a service business. However, the way you run a car repair shop can have a lot of entrepreneurship in it. In other words, a lot of innovation. So you could run a successful car repair shop that repairs cars like everybody else and just does a really fine job at it. You could also run a car repair shop that has a whole twist on the whole thing, which is kind of a standard steady business with an entrepreneurial twist in it in terms of marketing, how you present it, or how you welcome customers or how you gain customers and things like that. And I say that just because all those people are correct, as Ray pointed out, and being able to carry something out. But each of them can be on the top of the business venture as well, in terms of the CEO or the president or the person that makes it happen. But they'll go about that very differently. So people that are divergent thinkers are people that do entrepreneurial type things. Convergent thinkers will take business ideas that are good and optimize them. And often divergent thinkers definitely need convergent thinkers to carry out their ideas. Convergent thinkers often need to brush up against divergent thinkers to be able to stay abreast of new things that are changing. But I want to just sort of expand that a little bit and say both of them have a spot in business and at the top of business, meaning like being the founders or the head or something like that, as well as working in the middle of the business, acting out what the business is doing. Well, David, any other thoughts before we wrap up for this episode?
We kind of get to play a little bit off of this here is that I think that you tend to fit a little bit more in the category of the divergent thinker, and I tend to fit a bit more in the category of the convergent thinker. And so I think it's just been very fascinating to see you just like over the course of our relationship working together and as well as just our relationships with other coworkers. And, I think her two takes on that are interesting, but I think again, the personal triangle looking at the kind of three points of the triangle of how can interact each other and just how different people complement each other is something that's really cool to be able to see once you have a framework for understanding it. Because it's very easy for people at just about any walk of life to look at differences in people and how they work and say, that's different and I don't quite understand how they do things the way that they do things. Under being able to have a little bit more of a perspective on how God might have gifted somebody and then be able to say, and that can be an advantage if they're put in the right position and able to accomplish tasks in this way is something that can really be helpful both in a professional and a personal sense too.
Yeah, David, excellent example I missed, and I'm glad you brought it to my attention. I mean, David works for us as a convergent thinker in many respects and is essential to the functioning of Unbound. It's also should be noted that David ran his own business and still does projects on the side as a small business consultant. And so in that sense, it's not like David's convergent thinking skills meant that he couldn't be a quote unquote entrepreneur if that meant starting a business and running it. In fact, he's been quite successful at doing that. And also as an essential part of our larger team where his convergent thinking allows our entrepreneurial ideas to work. And so many times we have ideas that would not work if it wasn't for David and others like him taking an idea and saying, this worked, this doesn't work, put this together. So well, once again, thanks for taking the time to listen. I hope you benefited from Rhea Perry. Keep in mind that this kind of convergent and divergent thinking is very much a part and parcel of what we teach, especially in our Ascend program. So if you're interested in the things that you learned here, and if you're post-high school and you're looking for a very intense and very divergent thinking type of program that despite the fact that it's a divergent thinking program and the fact that it's different, is designed specifically through things like the personal triangle and the books that we mentioned earlier, to take students from all kinds of different sets of gifts and skills and teach them how those things work together, and then to give them an opportunity to work together. And the fact that we do skills-based and project-based education and work with other people. And we can say this with a great deal of confidence and authority that if you come and join our Ascend program, you will get a chance to learn the kinds of things that Ray is talking about. You will get a chance to try them out. It will be part of your curriculum. You'll be required to do so. And you will come out the other end with a great deal of confidence, a great deal of skill, and a great deal of experience, and doing the kinds of things that will enable you to make a difference in the world. And that the way we put is will enable you to thrive. Unbound also offers programs for high school and our Equip, our Explore, and our Declare programs. And so if you're interested in that and you're a homeschool student, definitely check out our website at beunbound.us for more information. Thanks again for your time. And until next time, be unbound.